At 45, Walter Payton's voice faded, but his truth remained. The man the world called sweetness, the symbol of grace and grit, carried secrets that football never knew. Behind the smile that charmed millions lived a story of pain, betrayal, and quiet defiance. His legend was built on light, yet shadows followed him until his final breath. When Walter Payton died in 1999, the world mourned a hero. Chicago wept, the league bowed its head, and fans spoke his name as if he were immortal. But what the world never saw was the weight he carried off the field, the rivalries that cut deep, the coaches and teammates who tested his pride, the system that took everything and gave too little in return. Why would a man adored by millions still feel unfulfilled? Why would a hero, defined by endurance and beauty, harbor grudges that time could not erase? These were not the battles of a player, they were the battles of a man. Walter Payton's story is not just about rushing records or touchdowns. It is about truth. It is about a man who smiled for the cameras but fought his demons in silence. The 5 hidden truths he carried reveal the price of greatness, the loneliness of fame, and the cold reality behind the sweetness. This is the story of the man who never stopped running, even when the game had already ended. Walter Payton was born in 1954 in Columbia, Mississippi, a place where dreams often ended before they began. In that small southern town, football was more than a game. It was a lifeline. For young Walter, it became a calling. From dusty fields and worn-out cleats, he learned that speed alone was not enough. Heart was what separated the good from the great. At Jackson State University, he became a legend before he ever stepped into the NFL. He was not the biggest, not the fastest, but he ran as if chased by something unseen. Every run was art mixed with violence. His balance was flawless, his will unbreakable. Teammates called him sweetness for his grace. Yet behind that nickname lived a man who demanded perfection. He practiced longer than anyone. He lifted, ran, and trained until exhaustion blurred into obsession. When the Chicago Bears drafted him in 1975, they needed a savior. The team was struggling, a dynasty turned relic. Walter Payton became their answer. He carried the ball, the franchise, and the city of Chicago on his back. Through pain, snow, and relentless hits, he delivered hope every Sunday. Fans worshipped him. Children imitated his stutter step in playgrounds. He became the heart of the city, the rare player who gave more than anyone could ask. Yet beneath that devotion grew a different truth. The Bears depended on him endlessly. But they did not always honor his sacrifice. Coaches used him until his body screamed. Management undervalued his worth. The league celebrated his highlights, but ignored the toll. He endured it all without complaint, masking anger with smiles and charm. Off the field, he was humble and private. He loved fast cars, practical jokes, and his family. But those closest to him saw the burden. He had built his identity around toughness, refusing to show pain even as it consumed him. The hits, the expectations, the endless spotlight wore him down. By the time his career neared its end, the man who once outran everyone could feel time catching him. He had carried the Bears to victory, broken records, and restored the team's pride. Yet, he also carried grudges, disappointments, and wounds that no trophy could heal. In his final years, as illness quietly spread through his body, Walter Payton began reflecting on his life. What he revealed before his death in 1999 was not bitterness, but honesty. Behind the sweetness was a man made of iron, scarred by betrayal, yet still defined by love for the game. Walter Payton's greatest rivalries were not always with men in helmets. Some of the deepest wounds came from the offices above him. The Bears' management, the men who made decisions about contracts, playing time, and legacy, became a quiet source of bitterness that followed him long after he stopped playing. When Payton joined the Chicago Bears in 1975, the team was in decline. The once mighty franchise had lost its way. They expected Payton to be their savior. But the relationship was never one of equals. Management saw him as an asset, not a partner. His rookie contract was modest, even by the standards of the time. Yet the team placed every ounce of their hope on his shoulders. Week after week, they handed him the ball, until his body trembled from exhaustion. He gave them victories, fans, and money. But respect came slowly. By the late 70s, Payton had become the entire offense. Opponents stacked their defenses against him, knowing that stopping Sweetness meant stopping the Bears. Still, he ran through every wall they built. He broke records, carried the franchise back to relevance, and filled Soldier Field with pride. Yet, inside the Bears' offices, appreciation was measured in numbers, not humanity. His value was calculated, not felt. Negotiations were often cold. Recognition was delayed. Payton felt used, not celebrated. The strain reached its peak in the 1985 season. The Bears had finally built a championship team. Their defense was ferocious, their confidence unmatched. For Walter, the Super Bowl was supposed to be his reward. It was his moment to crown a career of pain and perseverance. But when Chicago reached the goal line, the coaches and executives chose spectacle over honor. They gave the ball to William, the refrigerator Perry, instead of Payton. The crowd roared, cameras flashed, and history was made without him. On the surface, he smiled. He hugged teammates and posed for photos. Inside, he was crushed. The Bears had turned his dream into someone else's headline. For a man who had carried their hopes for 13 seasons, the gesture felt like betrayal. Years later, friends said he never got over that moment, not because of ego, but because he believed loyalty should be mutual. After his retirement in 1987, Payton remained close to the city but distant from the organization. He attended games, met fans, and stayed active in charity work. But his trust in the Bears' leadership never returned. He had given them everything and expected dignity in return. What he often received was silence. When he fell ill in the late 90s, some of those same executives sent condolences and tributes. Walter accepted them graciously, but those close to him knew the truth. He appreciated their words, but never forgot the years of neglect. In private moments, he would speak of love for the fans and pride for Chicago. But his tone would change when the topic turned to management. Cold truth. Walter Payton never truly forgave the Bears' management for treating him as a resource instead of a man. The organization that built its legend on his back failed to give him the simple respect he had earned. It was a wound he carried quietly until his final days. Walter Payton and Mike Ditka will forever be linked in football history. One was the heart of the field, the other the voice of the sideline. Together, they brought the Chicago Bears a championship, and gave the city an identity that endures to this day. Yet beneath the celebration, the respect, and the parades, their relationship carried tension that time never fully healed. Mike Ditka was intensity personified. He demanded obedience, discipline, and toughness from every player. His philosophy was simple. Football was war, and every man had to bleed for victory. For a team built on defense and brute force, Ditka's approach was a perfect fit. But for Walter Payton, who had already spent a decade carrying the franchise on his back, it was complicated. Payton was not a man who needed motivation. He was already obsessed with perfection. What he needed was acknowledgement. Ditka gave him discipline instead. Their relationship was professional, often respectful, but rarely warm. Ditka barked orders. Payton listened, performed, and delivered. In public, the coach praised him sparingly, choosing to highlight the team rather than the individual. Payton understood the message but felt the sting of being overlooked. He believed that leadership did not require humiliation, that greatness could be recognized without arrogance. Then came the moment that would define their divide. The Super Bowl, in 1986. Chicago dominated the game, crushing the New England Patriots in one of the most lopsided victories in history. As the fourth quarter began, the Bears stood at the goal line. For 13 seasons, Payton had been their anchor, their soul, the man who had made this glory possible. Yet the ball was handed not to him, but to William Perry. The stadium erupted, cameras captured the joy. And Walter Payton, standing silent on the sideline, watched his moment pass. After the game, he cried in private. Teammates saw him wipe his face with a towel as the celebration raged around him. It was not anger alone, it was pain. He had carried the team through years of defeat, through broken bones and bitter winters. And when triumph finally arrived, he was denied the moment he had earned. Years later, Ditka admitted it was the greatest regret of his coaching career. He said he wished he had given Payton the touchdown, that he had failed to honor the man who had carried them to greatness, but the apology came too late. Payton accepted it with grace, but he never forgot the humiliation. For him, It symbolized how even success could sting, how even victory could carry sorrow. When Walter spoke about Ditka in his later years, he did so with restraint. He respected the coach, admired his fire, and recognized what they had achieved together. But behind the respect lingered disappointment. Ditka had built a dynasty, yet in doing so, he had forgotten the heart that made it possible. Cold truth. Walter Payton never fully forgave Mike Ditka. The man who helped him reach the mountaintop also denied him his crowning moment. It remained one of the few wounds that time, fame, and legacy could not heal. Walter Payton and Jim McMahon shared the same uniform, the same huddle, and the same dream of bringing Chicago a championship. Yet their bond was never one of friendship. It was a partnership built on necessity, strained by personality, and marked by unspoken friction. McMahon was chaos. Payton was control. Together they created magic on the field. But behind that brilliance lived a quiet tension that never faded. Jim McMahon was unlike any quarterback Walter had ever played with. He was fearless, unpredictable, and rebellious. He wore sunglasses to press conferences, insulted authority with a grin, and treated rules as suggestions. Chicago loved him for it. The media adored his defiance. To many, he was the spirit of the '80s Bears, but for Walter Payton, who built his life around discipline and self-respect, McMahon was both fascinating and frustrating. Payton had carried the Bears for years before McMahon's arrival. He trained like no one else. He lived clean, studied film, and treated the game like a sacred craft. McMahon's wildness was the opposite. He led with instinct, took dangerous risks, and celebrated recklessness. To Walter, it was a contradiction of everything he believed football should be. Their dynamic became a mirror of two worlds colliding. During games, the difference in philosophy was visible. McMahon's risk-taking put Payton in difficult positions. Broken plays led to hits Walter should never have taken. When McMahon freelanced, Payton often paid the price. Yet despite the frustration, Walter never confronted him publicly. He stayed professional, channeling his anger into performance. Privately, teammates said he would shake his head after broken plays and mutter a few quiet words, never shouting, never losing composure. Off the field, the tension remained. McMahon loved attention. Payton preferred peace. While McMahon partied and clashed with management, Walter trained, mentored younger players, and guarded his privacy. Reporters gravitated toward the loud quarterback, leaving the quiet running back in the background. Payton noticed. He did not envy McMahon, but he resented the imbalance. The man who carried the Bears through darkness was often overshadowed by a man who thrived in the spotlight. Their rivalry was never open conflict, but it left a mark. After retirement, McMahon spoke fondly of Walter, calling him the greatest teammate he ever had. Payton, in return, offered kind words in public. But those who knew him best said he never truly trusted McMahon. He respected his toughness, admired his courage, yet disapproved of the recklessness that defined him. For Walter, professionalism was sacred. McMahon blurred that line too often. When Payton looked back in his final years, he spoke about teamwork as a test of patience. He said that leadership meant carrying others even when they disappointed you. Many believed he was speaking, in part, about McMahon. It was not hatred that lingered. It was disappointment. The kind that comes when two men share victory but not vision. Cold truth. Walter Payton respected Jim McMahon's talent, but their philosophies clashed until the end. What united them on the field divided them in spirit. It was a quiet conflict, unresolved, buried beneath the roar of a championship season. Among all the rivalries Walter Payton faced, none carried the bitterness of his encounters with Charles Martin. Martin was a defensive lineman for the Green Bay Packers, a man built for intimidation, and he used it like a weapon. The battles between the Bears and the Packers were fierce long before Payton arrived, but during his years, that rivalry turned violent. For Payton, the line between competition and cruelty was crossed, and Charles Martin became the symbol of that darkness. The mid-'80s were the height of the Bears-Packers war. Every meeting felt like a grudge match between cities as much as teams. Payton was the heart of Chicago, graceful and relentless. Martin was the face of Green Bay's fury, aggressive and unapologetic. They met countless times in the trenches, but one game in particular scarred the relationship forever. It was 1985, a season defined by dominance for the Bears and desperation for the Packers. On one play, Payton broke through the line, dancing past defenders, as he always did. Martin waited. As Payton was going down, Martin came from behind and delivered a vicious, unnecessary hit, driving him into the ground long after the whistle. The crowd gasped. Payton lay still for a moment, his helmet pressed into the turf. Before he rose, his face expressionless, but his anger burning. The hit was more than a penalty. It was a message. Martin wanted to hurt him, to prove that even sweetness could be punished. The play drew flags and outrage, but no suspension. In that moment, Payton saw the truth of the league he had served for over a decade. Violence was entertainment, and pain was part of the show. He finished that game, and many after it, without complaint. He never retaliated publicly, yet those close to him said that hit changed him. It reminded him that even the best could be targeted, that the league would not always protect its stars. For a man who respected toughness, but despised cheap shots, that memory lingered like a scar. Years later, when asked about the hardest opponents he ever faced, Payton mentioned defenders who tested his endurance and linebackers who earned his respect. He rarely spoke Charles Martin's name. When he did, it was short, direct, and cold. He never forgave him. That play became infamous, another chapter in the violent history of Bears-Packers clashes. But for Walter, it was personal. It was the moment he realized that some opponents were not rivals, but reminders of how cruel the game could be. As his body began to fail years after retirement, he remembered the hits, the pain, and the toll football had taken. He still spoke with love for the game, but he understood now that love had always come with a price. Cold truth. Walter Payton never forgave Charles Martin. The hit remained in his memory until the end. It was not just about pain. It was about principle. Football, he believed, should be brutal but never dishonorable. Martin had crossed that line, and sweetness never forgot. Walter Payton's final and most lasting grudge was not against a player or a coach. It was against the system itself. The NFL, the league that turned him into a hero, was also the machine that consumed him. He loved the game, but he despised how it treated those who made it beautiful. Behind the cheers and the trophies, he saw a system that demanded sacrifice and gave very little in return. From the day he entered the league in 1975, Payton understood that football was more than sport. It was business. Players were celebrated as long as they produced. When their bodies failed, the league moved on without hesitation. Payton trained harder than anyone, played through injuries, and set standards of endurance that few could match. Yet contracts rarely reflected his worth. Medical care was limited. Long-term protection for players barely existed. He played through pain that doctors later said should have ended his career years earlier. Knees, ribs, shoulders, and hands all bore the marks of battles won and lost. The league glorified his toughness, selling it as part of his legend, but offered little support when the pain became permanent. The very quality that made him a hero also became the reason he suffered in silence. In private moments during his retirement, Payton spoke of the cost. He admired the sport but not the structure. He said football asked men to give everything and then discarded them once they had nothing left to give. He was not bitter toward fans or teammates. His anger was directed at the system that profited from the pain of men like him. When his illness was diagnosed in the late 1990s, the contrast between heroism and neglect became clear. The league that had built its image on his courage could offer no real help. He faced his disease with the same quiet determination he brought to every fourth quarter. There were no excuses, no complaints, only resolve. Still, he wanted people to understand that legends are not invincible. In one of his final interviews, he spoke about how short life really is. He said that football gave him everything, yet it also took everything. It gave him purpose, but it left him broken. Those words were not resentment. They were revelation. He wanted the next generation to see beyond the glory, to understand the true price of greatness. After his death in 1999, the league created the Walter Payton Man of the Year Award, honoring players who combine excellence on the field with charity off it. It was a gesture of respect, but also an acknowledgement of what he represented. Payton had become the conscience of the game, a reminder that greatness comes with cost and that humanity must not be forgotten in the pursuit of glory. Cold truth. Walter Payton never forgave the system for valuing entertainment over compassion. He loved football, but he saw through its illusions. He believed that every player deserved dignity beyond the whistle. that courage deserved care. His final lesson was not about running faster or hitting harder. It was about seeing clearly, even through pain. In the story of the 1985 Chicago Bears, few moments were as famous as the touchdown scored by William Perry in the Super Bowl. To the world, it was comedy and celebration. To Walter Payton, it was pain wrapped in applause. The play that made millions laugh and cheer left him standing on the sideline, his helmet in his hand, watching history pass him by. Perry was never Walter's enemy. He was young, strong, and doing what coaches told him to do. But the decision to give him the ball at the goal line cut deep. For 13 seasons, Payton had carried the Bears through losing years, through blizzards, and broken bones. That championship was supposed to be his moment of release, the reward for all the punishment. Instead, it became a spectacle that erased him from his own victory. After the game, teammates noticed that Walter disappeared from the locker room. They found him later, sitting quietly, eyes lowered. He had no anger toward Perry, but the disappointment was impossible to hide. He congratulated his team, smiled for cameras, and said nothing. Yet that silence spoke louder than any protest. In later years, Walter rarely mentioned the play. When he did, his words were calm but heavy. He said that it taught him how fleeting glory can be, and how often those who deserve it the most are asked to wait. It was not bitterness, only understanding. Cold truth. Walter Payton never blamed William Perry, but he never forgot the moment. It became a lesson that even triumph can carry sorrow, and that humility sometimes bears the heaviest weight of all. Walter Payton's story did not end with his final game. His death in 1999 closed one of football's brightest chapters, but his legacy has never faded. The man the world called sweetness was not only a player, he was a symbol of endurance, humility, and unshakable dignity. Behind the smile that charmed millions lived a warrior who carried both triumph and pain with equal grace. Each of his hidden truths reveals something deeper about the cost of greatness. His conflict with the Bears' management exposed the imbalance between loyalty and business. He gave them his best years, his body, and his soul, yet often felt like a commodity instead of a partner. The lesson was cruel but clear. Even heroes can be underappreciated by the very institutions they build. His strained bond with Mike Ditka showed that leadership can inspire and wound at the same time. Ditka's toughness gave the Bears identity, but it also blinded him to the humanity of the man who carried that team for more than a decade. When Walter stood on the sideline during the Super Bowl, watching others take the spotlight, he understood what success without respect truly felt like. Jim McMahon taught him another truth. Talent does not always come with discipline. Payton admired McMahon's courage, but never trusted his recklessness. Their partnership was proof that chemistry cannot be forced, that even in shared victory, values can divide. Walter learned patience from that relationship. He learned that leadership sometimes means carrying those who cannot carry themselves. Then came the violence of Charles Martin. That moment of cruelty on the field marked the darker side of the game he loved. It was not just a cheap shot. It was a realization that football's beauty always existed beside brutality. Payton refused to retaliate, but he never forgot. He turned that anger into endurance, reminding the world that true strength is not measured by revenge, but by control. The NFL itself was his greatest teacher, and his greatest disappointment. It made him famous, rich, and immortal, but it also consumed his health and youth. When illness struck, he faced it alone, with the same quiet strength he once used to face defenders. He had learned long before that the system loved the spectacle of pain but offered little comfort to those who lived it. And then there was William Perry. That forgotten moment in the Super Bowl became a symbol of humility. Walter smiled through the pain, teaching future generations that dignity is not measured by touchdowns, but by the way a man carries defeat. By the time he retired in 1987, Payton had redefined the running back position. He broke records, rewrote history, and inspired a generation of athletes. Yet what made him extraordinary was not statistics. It was persistence. He never gave up on a play, never gave up on a season, and never gave up on himself. That spirit became the foundation of his legacy. When he announced his illness in the late 1990s, the world finally saw the man behind the legend. He did not hide. He spoke about his disease with honesty and courage. He asked fans to cherish life, to value family, and to give back. His words were not about football. They were about meaning. Walter Payton's death at 45 shook the sports world. Tributes poured in from fans, players, and rivals. The Bears retired his number, 34, and the NFL created the Walter Payton Man of the Year award, honoring players who combine greatness with compassion. It was a fitting tribute to a man who had lived for others as much as for himself. Today, more than 2 decades after his passing, Walter Payton remains an example of how legends are built. His hidden truths remind us that behind every trophy is a story of sacrifice, behind every smile is a trace of pain, and behind every moment of glory stands a lifetime of struggle. Sweetness was more than a nickname, it was his philosophy. No matter the hardship, he carried himself with grace, courage, and love for the game. Cold truth. Walter Payton's body gave out before his spirit ever did. His life was a lesson in endurance, his death a reminder of fragility. His legacy endures because it is real, because it carries both joy and sorrow, and because it proves that true greatness is not perfection, but perseverance. Walter Payton's story is not only about football. It is about humanity, sacrifice, and the price of excellence. He gave his body to the game, his heart to the city of Chicago, and his soul to the sport that defined him. Behind every highlight and every smile, there were hidden truths that reveal the man he truly was. Which moment of his journey surprised you the most? Was it the silence after the Super Bowl, the battles with the Bears management, or the strength he showed in his final fight? His story forces us to ask whether greatness is worth the pain it demands. At 45, Walter Payton left this world, but his lessons remain. His courage, humility, and compassion continue to inspire generations of athletes and fans. His legacy is not measured in records alone, but in the way he lived and faced adversity. If you believe his story deserves to be remembered, share this video with others who love football's golden age. Comment your thoughts below and tell us which truth of Walter Payton's life moved you the most. And if you want to uncover more untold stories, more rivalries, and more legends who shaped the game beyond the scoreboard, subscribe to NFL Hidden Truths. Here, we reveal the human side of football, the moments history tried to forget, and the emotions that defined a generation. Every legend has a story, but only a few reveal their hidden truths. Stay with us, and together, we will uncover them all.